What's going on, Bassmaster fans? Welcome into another episode of Inside Bassmaster Podcast. And this is a post-classic edition. I'm your host, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, obviously, Kyle Jessie, the man in Birmingham, Alabama, keeping control of everything website related there. Kyle, how are you, man?
I am good. Speaking of the website, we just launched the new website today. That's really, really exciting. So usually you get back from the Classic and get a little breath of relief, but it's actually been as hectic, if not more hectic since, but we're happy to get that launched.
We're Bassmaster employees. We're staff, but we are also AKA David Blaine with how long we've been holding our breath over the last couple of weeks, getting the Elite Series season started with 2 weeks in a row, a couple of days, then we do the Classic, couple of days, and then we're going into Santee Cooper Lakes, and then we've got a week with other events, and then we have Chickamauga, and before you know it, the fish are spawning everywhere in April. So it's definitely been a very hectic time and launching the new website. I've been a part of a couple website launches, and I know this one's got a different tone to it around the office because everyone's excited for it.
No doubt. Yeah, it's going to be good. Obviously, with any website launch, you're going to have some little kinks and things to work out. And we're going to, just know that we're working hard to get all those fixed, but we are certainly all really, really excited about it. It looks great so far.
Direct all your emails if you have any issues to Chris Mitchell, and his email is at bassmaster.com, and you can send all of your complaints to him. That's where I'm going to send my complaints to him for sure. But Kyle, it is the post-classic edition. We had the Harris chain, then we previewed, we got to talk to Buddy Gross a little bit, and we previewed the Classic, and then we had the 52nd annual Bassmaster Classic at Lake Hartwell. And I don't know if we can finally, I want to find every person who said boo Lake Hartwell when we announced it, and I want to just DM them, and I probably will have time over the next few weeks to do that and say, how about that Classic now? Because 3 anglers within 11 ounces. I watched every second of Bassmaster Live as a commentator, and I had no idea who had won. I know photographers on the water thought they had cover shots possibly for magazines for decades, and other guys won the event. It was absolutely incredible duel there between Jason Christie, Kyle Welcher, and Stetson Blaylock on that final day.
Absolutely. And it's exactly what you and I had talked about previously, when we were previewing the Classic, is the fact that we were really hoping and thinking that it was going to be really diverse, guys fishing out deep, guys fishing shallow, everywhere in between. I heard Kyle Welcher say on one of his YouTube videos, said that caught a bass in 50 or 60 foot of water and then one in every depth in between, which is exactly what we were hoping for an entertainment factor. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to be a part of in person for sure.
And man, we had some drama on that final day. We had a tie going out. We had literally 2 boats idling out as the co-leaders going into the final day of the Bassmaster Classic. You literally cannot get any closer than that. And then you have the guys, they're the 2 leaders, they drop to 9th or 10th like that. I mean, if you're not catching them in the first hour at Lake Hartwell, you're not going to stay near the top of the leaderboard. We saw that with Brian New on day 2. Every single day of this event, the leaders got started very slowly. I don't know if it's flotilla, so much pressure. I don't know if it was just that much changing at Hartwell, but we saw Jason Christie catch one good one and go for a while without a fish, had to switch up his game plan and leave. And then we also saw Kyle Welcher just putting into just a couple small fish, a 5 fish limit for 5 or 6 pounds. And then he started to make his moves. And so we'll get into a lot of that aspects, and we're going to have some special guests on the podcast today. But honestly, we looked around the Bassmaster Live set and we said, is this going to happen again? To Jason Christie leading the Classic, and for Kyle Welcher being not his first Classic, but his second Classic, just kind of is a guy with this little Classic experience, is he going to falter on the final day? We were wondering who was going to make that jump, and obviously Stetson Blaylock threw his name in the ring as well.
Yeah, no, like you said, getting out to a quick start was really, really important for the sake of, one, just the angler's confidence. Obviously, it helps a lot to catch a quick limit and then, be able to go head hunting, per se, the rest of the day. And yeah, I mean, if you didn't get out to that quick start, you were just relying on that later largemouth bite to work out. And obviously we saw for a lot of guys it did. And then, like you said, on day 1 for Brian New, the conditions changed up so much on day 2, it kind of hurt that dock bite. And, it was definitely a much more of a slow grind than maybe it was on day 1.
Day 2 was really weird in this event as well. We had a 20-pound bag, 20 pounds even was the day 1 leading weight, but 18-13, I believe, was Kyle Welcher. and he was second place in that, and after day one. But no 19-pound bags. I think Jason Christie was down tied for ninth place with Mark Frazier, the last spot on camera for day two. So we had Christie all 3 days on camera. But then we go to day two, and so many people who had caught good bags caught 12 or 13 pounds, a pretty average bag. But then we also saw 4 anglers catch 19 pounds, 2 of those outside the cut to make their way, into the cut or salvage and get higher up, especially for fantasy fishing teams. People were excited about that, but very, very weird. And I think one of those four bags that were 19 pounds or more was Jason Christie, and that's why he vaulted into a tie for the lead. But man, it's really weird, and maybe we can get into that with our guests, but a 3-day Bassmaster Classic. We have 4-day Elite Series events where a pattern that is formulated lasts all 4 days. They can do the same pattern 4 days, maybe switch the areas, but the same pattern. It seems like in a Classic, we could do it in the most stable time of year. And 3 days, it's going to change 2 times within those 3 days. And we saw that on day 2, and then we saw that the morning of day 3.
Yeah, and like you said, you already hit on this a little bit, but the Classic provides so many more variables, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. I mean, like you said, flotillas, there's so many more factors that go into the Classic, from a 3-day tournament standpoint than even a 4-day tournament, like an Elite Series event. And like you said, I think that it's always probably going to be like that. And guys like Jason Christie that have experienced that and know that to be true, obviously had a little bit of an advantage in this tournament.
Yeah, we saw, I think we talked about it yesterday. There were 16 first-time Classic qualifiers, and I think only 5 made the cut. 5 made the top 25, which sounds like a good number, but then you have 11 of the bottom 30 that were first-time guys. It just shows you how hard it is to actually excel in your first Classic, not because the stage is too big, but there are just so many factors. The practice format, and for folks who are tuning in listening, we know the Classic's a 3-day event, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but the practice period is probably what is the most different, is that you practice Friday, Saturday, and Sunday the week before. Then everyone gets one more day of practice on Wednesday, official practice day, and then you roll into Friday of the event. So a lot can change, and it's really the most open-minded angler tournament out there. Like, you have to be open-minded, because the last time you saw the lake was a day or 2 ago. And the last time you saw that was 2 or 3 days prior to that. So if you found something on day 1 of practice on Friday, it's been over a week since you found that. And in the spring, there's nothing that lasts a week. If there's a summertime tournament, maybe a pattern lasts a week, but in the spring, that is a daily thing that changes, and sometimes an hourly thing, especially when the water temperature and the air temperature really hit higher temperatures quickly. Things can change fast.
Yeah, and how many guys over the course of 3 days did you hear say, you have those herring fish or those offshore fish located, and then they would show up on day 1, day 2, whatever it would be, and they'd just be gone. So then, like you said, you add in the fact that you might have found these fish literally a week before the tournament started. So, I mean, I think that obviously the shortened practice day on Wednesday would have helped a lot of guys just to at least know for sure whether or not those fish are still there. But I mean, that's a lot of things to check in a short amount of time. And yeah, like you said, the springtime, naturally, you're going to have so many changes that something lasting a week is almost unheard of. I mean, it just doesn't really exist.
Yeah, and I think some of those guys that we think of that are maybe stubborn, we would just call them stubborn, but they know what they do well, and when that's working, they're the best in the world at it. Guys like Jason Christie, Greg Hackney, even Gerald Swindle, guys that have not won a Classic. Now we could take Christie off that list, but guys that have not won the Classic, but that when it's happening the way they want it to, they are on a roll and they're hard to beat. That's why this event has eluded so many great anglers, because it does change so much. So just like I think Rick Clunn said years ago, the reason that Roland Martin and Bill Dance never did well in the events was because a lot of the Classics early on, they didn't have necessarily practice time and pre-study time. They did not know where they were going. It was like the get on the plane, fly, and there you're at your location. Everybody has the same rigs, all that stuff. So it wasn't their skill. It was just your preparation time. Some guys like to have all the variables in front of them. Some guys are cool with, I don't even know where we're going. We show up there, and then all of a sudden, I have to figure it out on the fly. And so I saw some maturity out of some anglers this year that caught me off guard. And speaking of one of those anglers, our first guest of the show, I'm going to go ahead and bring him in, Kyle. and that would be Mr. Jason Christie, the Bassmaster Classic champion now. We can dub him that, and I know he is very, very pleased with that title. But Jason Christie, one of those guys who's a pre-tournament favorite for this Classic. He was one that a lot of people put the eggs in his basket because there were so many storylines about this event for him. He's done well on Lake Hartwell. He's done well in the Classics there in the past, and this time of the year, I mean, he's one that's hard to beat, Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you factor in the things that we said before the tournament, with the weather shaping up to where, we would have thought Jason would have liked the conditions. And then you add that to the fact that he had such a diverse game plan. It was like he was able to basically go from one thing to the other without hesitation. And, it worked out for him for sure.
Jason, can you hear me and Kyle?
I can hear you. I'm trying to find a place to park. We got caught in a bad spot, but I see something right up there. So I can hear you.
It's not a problem. We'll wait.
Video in about a minute.
That's totally fine. This is just I guess it's a lucky break that we even get to talk to you with how many interviews you've probably been through this week, but a quick turnaround before the next event. So I guess you're going to say yes to every possible interview to tell your story of how you won the Classic this year.
Dude, I booked an interview today for October. Like, it is, you hear these guys that talk about it and you're like, I can handle it. And I can handle it, but good.
It's almost like you have to hire an assistant, and you have to have somebody who has your itinerary on. And I think that let me see if he's jumping in here again. There, we can see you now.
Yeah, we accidentally had to turn the camera on. This is our first rodeo. It's the first time we've ever done all this stuff, so you have to kind of bear with us.
That's totally fine, Kyle. We got to give a round of applause to him for winning the Classic, because that final day, I watched live all day, obviously broadcasting it. Kyle was on the water. There were 3 anglers within 11 ounces. We had no idea what was going on when everyone pulled into the arena. I mean, I'm texting every photographer, every cameraman, every angler, like, who has them and what do you have? And you were one that was pretty elusive, but everyone, you guys were so close weight-wise. You, Kyle, Stetson, it was so tight at that final weigh-in.
It was. And honestly, I'm about to stop right here. Honestly, I didn't even think that I had a remote chance to win. I mean, whenever I came back in to check in, you kind of think, I didn't do anything wrong. I fished what I wanted to fish, didn't lose a fish all week. I'm like, dude, I probably just lost this because I didn't get the big bite that I thought that I needed to win. And, whenever you fish a lot with the live cameras and the bass track, if they're not talking to you, it's a bad deal. And, Jake's over there and he's got his earpiece in and we're idling. I've already checked in. We're idling up to the boat dock and he's got his earpiece in. He pulls it out and he goes, "How much weight do you think you have?" I was like, "Dude, it don't matter." He's like, "No, how much do you think?" I was like, I know I probably got 16 and a half. He puts his earpiece back in. He's talking. He takes it out. He goes, "Do you think there's any chance you have 17? And whenever he said that, like I got goosebumps right now. It's whenever I just, like, my stomach turned upside down because I knew that I had a chance, even though I still didn't think I'd won, but I knew that there was going to be a possible chance. And I knew that I was going to be somewhere around there. But dude, you know how it is when you have those bags. They all feel the same. They can weigh 18, 16. Yeah, you don't know. But I remember that like it was 5 minutes ago. I just, started doing the Ace Ventura dry even.
Well, I thought it was very interesting that, one of my tasks on the final day that's different than all the other days of competition is I have to be the wife wrangler. I have to be the fiance wrangler. Whoever's going to win and whoever's going to lose, I got to walk them both. I'm like the Grim Reaper walking through the family section. If you're not getting asked by me, you don't have a shot to win. And so I remember walking by Shanna and I was on the floor. She was in the seats and I said, "Hey, just a heads up, be ready because I may have to get you." And then I didn't talk to her for like 45 minutes. Everybody else, the other 19 anglers before the Super 6 weigh in, I hadn't touched base with her since then. And after, she says, I thought you already got the other wives. I thought you already got Hunter and Lindsay, you know, Stetson's wife and Kyle Welcher's wife. I thought you already got them. And so I thought he had lost. And I was like, I knew I had to get you at least because Jason was the last one away. And I saw her eyes when I walked down the steps and I said, Shanna, it's time to go. She was like, oh, shoot, we're doing this thing. And so she had to start walking. And so it was a very, very cool moment. It definitely was an awesome weigh-in. But walk me through. Go ahead.
Yeah, she said she felt like it was some kind of special ops thing. Like she was sitting there and all of a sudden it's like, let's go, it's time now. So, yeah, I've heard that story a few times as well.
And so it was very interesting. But tell me about that final day, because I rode with you on Wednesday at practice and I got to see that starting area. And you always hope Davey goes out with folks, Robbie Floyd goes out with folks, and you always hope what we see on Wednesday isn't just like some illusion. It's actually something you're going to use in the game plan. You took me right to the spot that put a lot of weight in your boat all week. Tell me about that final day, because you mentioned it. The conditions were different in there. There were leaves and you only caught one in there, but it was a good one.
Yeah. You know, I was kind of, I was really excited to go the last day because I felt like I had learned a lot about the area where, you know, there was a cast where it seemed like if I got a bite, they were bigger. I mean, 3.5 to 4.5. And then I could just go back there and catch a lot of fish and still have a chance to catch a big one. And so I was excited, and I get there and man, like as soon as I put the trolling motor down, I look up down the gut and it's just leaves. It's like somebody had, like a storm had come through or something. And it was hard to make a cast, you know, and fortunately, luckily, you know, I catch one and it's a good, like you say, a good one. And that was the cast. And I thought, all right, it's time to start meandering up through here and see what else we got. And dude, it was a ghost town. I mean, just nothing. There was still a little bit of bait, but hardly any fish. And, you know, about that time, I'd probably been in there for 45 minutes or so. And I was like, here we go. You know, day 3. That was a really big curveball. And, you know, what do we got now? And you know, I was comfortable going and flipping docks the rest of the day, but I knew that the later it gets in the day, the better the fishing was going to be. So one of the things the past 2 days was I had left there with a limit, 13, 14 pounds every day, and 2 or 3 of the fish that I would eventually weigh in. But anyway, I was, you know, idling out of there, and I told Jake, I was like, golly, you know, that one bite or one fish, and that was it. And he's like, dude, you've only weighed 1 or 2 out of here every day. He goes, and you've culled everything else, so we're really right back to where we were. And I was like, you know, Jake, I know cameramen are supposed to be neutral, and they are. But dude, Jake rode with me in 18, and he felt a lot. He wanted it as bad as, not as bad as me, but he wanted it pretty bad. And so he was a silent cheerleader. And, you know, the text that I sent him after that day was just his attitude throughout the day. You know, I gave him a couple of chances to be negative, and he never was. He was always positive. You know, just like saying, hey, we left with 1. He's like, dude, you got a big one, and you were going to cull them all out anyway. I'm like, you know, you're right. So off we go. You know, that kind of started off that way. And then the dock deal, man, it was slow. I mean, it was so much time in between docks, and then let me hold this. And then I would eventually, you know, get a bite. But one of the problems that I have fishing is I never give myself enough credit about the pattern. You know, I'm like, I think this is it, but I'm going to keep trying this. And finally, about 10:30, I was like, dude, they're on the walkways. Don't flip anything other than walkways. Just cover a bunch of water. And you know, eventually we started getting bit. And, you know, late in the day, you know, the one that got caught in the rope. And then I don't even know if Jake filmed the one or if you guys got to see the one over the cable. But the one over the cable is the one that won the event. And well, yesterday, whenever I hook that fish and get it in, I just take my jig out of its mouth, cool, and I take that rod and I put it in the rod locker and I grab another one. Hadn't touched that rod since then, and I pulled it out a couple of days ago and just like felt of like the first 10 feet. I mean, if Kyle Welcher knew how small that line was at one point and knew that was the difference between him winning the Classic and me winning the Classic, I mean, he would be very upset. I mean, you know what I mean. But yeah, and that's whenever you have tournaments like that, from start to finish, not losing one, getting them over tables, making good decisions. I mean, I honestly think that it was already scripted before we started fishing. I was just an actor in the play.
So Jason, we're going to get into bait talk here in just a second, but I've got a question for you. So obviously you played college basketball or a college, or coached basketball. You always have those players that step up when the moment's the biggest. And it seems like in the last, close to 2 decades, there's almost nobody that steps up to the plate in these big moments quite like you do. Where does that stem from for you?
Oh man, you gave me goosebumps. I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with, playing ball and sports and coaching and stuff like that. I mean, I can remember the college coach that I had, we pressed from the start of the game to the finish of the game. Didn't matter if we were up 20, down 20. And his philosophy was always just wear the opponent out. But I think the biggest thing is the Classic, since they moved it to the spring, it sets up to my absolute favorite time of the year. And I know in those events, that time of year, you're really never out of it. I mean, there's big bags swimming around, and, I can do what I like to do, which is flip, throw a spinnerbait, all of that stuff. And it's comfortable. We go to lakes that, for the most part, I'm comfortable with. And I think just all of those ingredients fits into the Classic. And that's how I fish the Elite Series anyway. I mean, I treat every event like the Classic because, I don't know, I just don't worry a lot about points. I believe that the points will kind of fall where they may. You just go fish and try to win every trophy. And that comes back from, all the team tournaments back home where first place was a new boat or $25,000 and second place was free lunch for a week. I mean, you fished to win and that was it. And I think that's, the combination of all of those is where all that comes from.
Jason, I know that Hartwell is something, it's a body of water that you do very well on. Now that this is your 8th Classic that you fished and 4 top 7s, 2 of them on Lake Hartwell, 2 of them on Grand Lake. And I asked you this question when we were out there, but also I think one evening after weigh-in. They're totally different bodies of water in terms of clarity, in terms of, I guess sometimes the layout. But what for the Oklahoma anglers, Luke Palmer included, even Edwin Evers, and you've got yourself, Jared Miller did well early in the Classic event. What is it about the Oklahoma anglers or guys that do well on Grand Lake that is so similar to Lake Hartwell, even though they don't have spotted bass and they just kind of act probably differently with the blueback herring? There has to be something about it.
I think you're exactly right. They're if this makes any sense, they're totally different, but they're very similar. I mean, how they set up. I can remember my first trip to Grand Lake and just being overwhelmed. You couldn't even hardly fish the bank by all the boat docks. I mean, it's just like, it was just, I don't know, it's chaos looking at it, and it was confusing and stuff like that. And then, after fishing Grand a year or 2 or 3, it all just kind of makes sense. Like, you can almost pull up and see a row of 20 docks and know that typically they're going to be on those 2 or 3 by where they sit on the bank, how they set, and stuff like that. And I'm going to say that's probably where these guys get it from is just being up there and learning the lake. I think they're really similar, other than blue heron and Hartwell being pretty clear. They're big. You can spread out. And the cool thing is you can get on a pattern like I did the last day. I mean, I was pretty much the last day fished all new water. I just got on Google, got on Active Captain, and just, there was 2 pieces. It needed to be shallow, 3 pieces. It needed to be shallow. It needed to be a dock. And if it was isolated, it was better. So, and that's all I did the last day is run, 75 to 80% of the stuff I fished the last day I've never seen before.
So let's get into that. Let's talk about your jig setup. First off, I'd like to start by saying I still have your jig from the final day. So
I saw it on eBay though for $150. So
listen, I tried to sell it back to Chad and Dustin at Pradco, and they wouldn't buy it. So I guess I'm just going to give it back to you at Santee.
I'll buy it because I am out. That one that you have is the very last one that I had.
I will bring it back to you for the Santee event. Let's talk about the jig a little bit. Obviously, you had a 1-2 approach as far as baits go, fishing sheet or deep and shallow. Let's start with the jig. What makes this jig so good to you? Obviously, it's a 5/8 ounce jig, so it falls faster. You have the skirt way trimmed up. Just talk about the importance of the rate of fall of this jig and kind of some of the intricate features that make it, such a good jig.
First of all, I wanted that heavy jig. Most of the other jigs that we make in the Booyah line and stuff like that are half, 3/8 and stuff like that. And to me, that's a clear water jig. It's heavy. The colors in it are really, really lifelike. And it's the hook. It's all of the components that make that bait good. But I wanted something heavy so that bait would fall fast. I felt like if these fish got a good look at my bait, they weren't going to bite it. And I think that's why going into the second and the third day, I could only get bit on the walkways is because these fish are a foot deep from the bottom of the foam to the bottom of the lake. And they just have to react. You're sitting there and you drop it in their face. They either have to eat it or move. And I could not get bit on the outside of the docks. And I know that there was fish there, but I just couldn't get bit. So that's why I chose that one. It's heavier, it falls faster, and even the chunk that I used on that, it's a very small chunk for a jig that big, and that's the reason. I just didn't want a lot of plastic. I wanted it to fall fast, and there was a guy that I traveled with a long time ago, and he's a big jig fisherman. He believed that whenever you go to lakes and you fish a jig in clear water, that you want the jig to be similar to the same color as the bottom, if that makes sense, to where it kind of blends in, because that's what forage does, and fishing that jig around those docks and stuff, and when it hit the dirt, it looked real, very real. So yeah, all the components, hook, the weed guard, and the color, and most of all, it was the head and the weight of the head.
Jason, I'm a Carolinian. I know I live in Little Rock now, but I'm a Carolinian, grew up in the Lake Norman region, which if you don't like boat docks, don't go to Lake Norman. If you don't like boat docks, don't go to Lake Hartwell. And so the first thing that I learned fishing docks was that not all the docks are the same. People just be like, yeah, I'm fishing a dock pattern. And I'm like, nowadays I don't cut them any slack. That's not a pattern, because there are 7 dock patterns going on at a lake at any given time based on the type of dock, the depth of the dock, and then obviously where you're fishing on the dock. Did you see, because I was with you in practice and we kind of went for 2 hours on that Wednesday of dead period, and you were searching around for color of water, dock positioning, and you pulled around this point. You did a Yui and you said, I'm going to fish those 4 docks. There should probably be a fish. I should probably at least catch one. And then you catch one on the first dock, and I was like, well, he's 1 for 1. And he said, I may catch one on the rest of these docks. And you went 4 for 4 on those docks. And I was like, something that to me is cooler than catching the fish, because something in your mind triggered you to do that. And I know you mentioned those factors, but it went from being you catch spotted bass at the end of the docks to you got to put it in between the floats to then on the final day, you said it was the walkways. Did you start to see that transpire from day 1, 2, and 3 every afternoon when you'd catch them? Was it a little bit different, especially when you went through the same areas? I know you ran new water, but when you did fish a similar dock that you had done previously, did you see them kind of gravitating towards that bank a little more?
Yeah, and I don't know. I think there's 2 factors in that. One may be fishing pressure. Maybe these guys that were wacky rigging and stuff, maybe they weren't getting all the way up there, because of the cables and stuff. That could have been it. And then the other thing is I was told after weigh-in the last day that one of the competitors saw a lot of fish on bed. And usually whenever these fish are going to spawn, that's what they do. They'll move up there right when they get there. They'll suspend on the outside corners, and then they'll just start working their way up there. And their last stop before they actually get on the bed is the walkway. That's why whenever you're sight fishing and stuff, you see so many beds around the edge of that walkway. It's a place that they can still slide back there and be protected, but they can still see the bed. And I really believe that was it. If we would have went back to the same stretch of docks the next day or two, there would have been beds around those walkways. But, and your comment about the docks, I agree with you. And that's what I learned about Grand. Not only is it the depth of the dock, it's how the dock sits close to the bank in relation to the bank. I fished a stretch of docks the last day that I'd found on Google. They were all perfect. I mean, there was like 15 in a row. Every one of them was 2 foot deep, but they were 30 yards off the bank. There was nothing for them to get up there. I think I just lost one there. It was like a 2-pounder, but so not only is it the depth, it's how they relate to the bank, whether they're on a point, they're in a back of a pocket. I mean, like you say, there's a lot of factors in the dock pattern.
So Jason, let's fast forward or I guess backtrack back to the moment you realized you were going to hoist that trophy over your head. If you had to say a percentage between relief and happiness, what was it? Was it 50-50? Was it 80-20? What like honestly, what would you have to say?
I don't remember that. I blacked out, I think. I don't think I woke up till like yesterday after lunch. I don't know what the word is, but you ever watch those movies where something happens and just somebody's life, spins through their head in 2 seconds? That's what happened. I mean, once I saw those numbers and whatever happened, that's just what it is. I mean, it was all those years just spinning through my head of, what happened at Grand, losing those fish at the Hartwell Classic, re-qualifying in the Opens, driving from, East Coast to Oklahoma overnight to get to a place. I mean, it was all of that in 2 seconds. And then it was, it was done. I mean, and I don't know what the word is for all of that, but I don't know. It was
Inception.
It was crazy. Yeah. And it was really a blur. I mean, it feels, there's a little bit of me that feels like the Classic was 5 minutes ago. And there's a little bit of me that feels like the Classic was 2 months ago. Like, it's weird. I'm still a little lost on all that.
Well, Kyle, you're lucky that you weren't the driver after the Champions Toast, because the first thing that Jason Christie said when he got in my car, he said, "Ronnie, not, hey, thanks for taking me in my truck and boat, man. Appreciate you, your lifesaver. Thanks, man. You're awesome." He said, "The door's shut," and he goes, "You didn't think I won, did you, Ronnie?" And I was like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? How do you ask me that? I mean, come on. And I will never forget that, because I was like, are you kidding me? I had the utmost confidence in you for 90% of the day. But that last catch by Stetson with literally 1 minute left, I thought that was the fish. And so I have to always remember that, give you a hard time about that. But, I trusted in Jason Christie, but the same thing you said, I had all those different moments flashing through my head on that final day when you were running around. and you didn't know necessarily, you didn't know that you were behind. You only had one fish and you were just running around. I had all those moments from the other classics flashing through my head as well. But the way you were calm, cool, and collected, doing your thing, that was very impressive. So I'll let you heckle me for that. But I did pick you to ride with you on Wednesday. I will say that.
Nice. You know, on Sunday, the last day, I did run around. You know, you can probably watch Bass Track or whatever. And there was a time where I just took off running. I ran up the Tougaloo. And the reason for that was I had a creek up there that I fished in practice one day that I had a ton of bites in, and it was the right kind of creek. And I didn't use it the first 2 days. And that third day, when the going got tough, about 11 or 12, I was like, all right, I'm going to go hit that creek because I think I can get a lot of bites in there and potentially catch some big ones. Well, you know, it was a 10-minute run, and I run all the way up there, get there, and there was a competitor back there. So then I got to wheel out of there, and I had marked some stuff on Google to fish on my way back. And so that was my little sweep up the lake there. It wasn't just, hey, let's run around and remind everybody what happened in 2018. I was headed up there to fish. And that, you know, that right there, exact reason is one of the reasons I chose not to fish dirty water, because, you know, you could have ran 5 miles to the next spot and there'd be a boat there. And then you got to go another 5. And even if there wasn't a boat there, maybe there was just one that left 30 minutes ago. So to me, this year's Classic, that was the best decision that I made.
So this is not so much a question, but Ronnie wanted to give you a hard time, so we can give him a hard time real quick. One of two things happened there at the weigh-in, and I'm not sure what. We can let him try to justify what happened, but somebody was either cutting onions or he was crying when you won. All I'm saying is that, you know, he might not have thought you won, but I think he was plenty happy you won.
I will say every single Classic winner, I said there's 2 feelings I feel as a fan and just a passionate person about this sport, because I've been a little kid in that crowd watching my idols and people do it. And now I'm working it, and I know what y'all go through necessarily to get to that point. And so even if it's the guy I don't like at all on the Elite Series, which there are 0, I love them all. Don't let anybody say otherwise, but I want to run through a brick wall. I'm so stoked for them. And I also want to cry because I think about that moment if I was to win a Classic. And like when you do that fist pump and you take your hat off and you do it again, I mean, I'm like, Jason Christie, point to the biggest man in the bar and I will run through him right now because I'm so stoked. It's always an incredible moment when, and like you said, your whole life runs through your head. For 2 seconds, the entire arena gets dead quiet. You fist pump, but no one freaks out until we hear Dave Mercer say something. And then once you're done thinking it, the whole place explodes. It's one of the coolest moments ever.
Yeah. But you know what? And I missed I was so close to having a terrible moment because, you know, that weight, we all know where that weight's going to come up. I mean, I'm sitting there staring at it, and I can see pretty good, but sometimes not as good. How terrible would it have been if it would have been 17-3 instead of 9? And I beat Mercer to the punch, and all of a sudden Mercer's like, no, that's really not it. Kyle won. But I thought about that. I was like, dude, you should have waited until Mercer called it. But I mean, when I saw that, there was nothing that could have held me back from letting go, because there was a lot of stuff that needed to come out of my body.
I noticed one thing. When you pulled up in your boat, I literally said this, and don't hold it against me. I said mentally, will this be the 3rd Classic that we don't get to hear from Jason Christie on stage? Because the winner, it would kill the moment completely if the leader that didn't win got interviewed. And so it's like, are we going to hear from him this time? When the boat pulled up and you stood there for a second, like looked at Mercer, what was going through your head? I mean, did you want him to just waltz out there and talk to you? Or were you just taking it all in before you grabbed your fish? Because that moment's like, you want to say something, because this is an opportunity not many people ever get to lead a Bassmaster Classic. Only 650 people have ever been in a Classic. So to even lead one going to the final day, it's a very, very small group. So, I mean, what was going through your head before you reached in the live well and stepped on stage?
I didn't know what was going on because you're right. There was a couple classics I didn't get the opportunity to speak up there. And I had talked to those guys this week. I said, especially after the second day, I said, hey, no matter what happens tomorrow, if I win, if I lose, whomever, everybody deserves an opportunity to talk up there because, the first 2 days are kind of run through, and you don't get to get up there and talk about sponsors and stuff like that. So when I came into the arena and I stopped, and I didn't know if Mercer was going to call me up or what. And I was just like, what do you want me to do? And he's like, let's go. And I was ready to go. I mean, at that point I was ready to go because I needed to know now. But when I pulled up, honestly, it was 50-50. I mean, it could have said 17-3 and it could have said 17-9. And I wouldn't have been surprised either way, if you know what I mean. So I was just following Mercer's lead and his direction. He gave me 0. So we just kind of went on.
There definitely was kind of a moment of awkward. Nobody knew what the heck was going on. I definitely know exactly what you mean. Last question that I've got for you. So something you talked about on stage was being a stubborn angler and talking about the big bite you got in practice. That you didn't want to lead you down a wrong path. Kind of explain that to somebody that might not understand what a stubborn angler means.
Well, there's fish out there. There's bites in practice. There's bites in an event that can lead you the wrong way. I mean, just because you get a bite doesn't mean that other fish are doing the same. I mean, there's random fish that's just swimming around somewhere. But, even before we got here, I kind of had a game plan. And during practice, I worked on that. And it was similar to the game plan that I had. I had to still make some minor tweaks to it. But I just couldn't hold off anymore the second day of practice. And I ran up in the dirt. And, dude, I didn't go 50 yards. And I caught a 6-pounder. And I was just like, golly, here we go. Now I'm getting spread out. And I don't want to be doing this. And honestly, when I caught that 6-pounder, I didn't think there was anybody around. And I get it to the side of the boat and I look over and there's a local coming through underneath the bridge there. And he's looking at me and I take it off and slide it down. And I'm just like, this is what it's going to be like. Am I the guy that's going to catch the 6 or am I the guy that's going to be 5 minutes late trying to come in? And I made 4 or 5 casts and gut feeling was just like, this don't need to happen. And I am stubborn. That I was stubborn the last day this year. A lot of people would have started doing it, but I had a plan. I was going to stick to it. The first event, I think I told Ronnie this on Wednesday, the first event that I won at Hartwell, everything went like clockwork until the last day. 11 o'clock, I didn't have a bite. And I pulled the trolling motor up and I'm like, I'm going somewhere. And the camera guy goes, where are we going? I was like, I don't know. And just something come over. I was like, I don't even know where I'm going. And for 3.5 days, I've caught them out of this. And I literally just put the trolling motor right back down and won the event. So, man, I don't, everybody wants to know the answer. When do you need to be stubborn and when do you need to not be? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't think everybody will. I just know that until the day that I die, I'll probably be stubborn. I'm just stubborn in life. I'm stubborn in life in general.
We don't all have the opportunity to be stubborn, though, because Jason Christie's got another level of skill where stubbornness is a top 10. Stubbornness for me, I'm bringing 1 to the scales, baby, and I'm way down the list. So I've got two things for you in this last question, and we'll let you go. You're a huge hunter as well as fisherman, but I've been to your house, and your trophy room is not the focal point. The deer on the wall are the focal point. Is the classic trophy going in the living room where the focal point is, or is it going to go with all the elite trophies? And the second part of that question is, I asked if after day 2, I said 300K sounds good. How much of East Oklahoma are you going to buy? Have you figured that out yet?
I'm going to buy as much as I can. Hunting land, that is. I don't know. It all sounds good as far as that. Dude, I know people look at the number and they think, golly, I haven't even thought about that. I mean, the money's, I haven't even thought about it. I mean, I'm hoping she has the check, but the trophy, we're getting ready to start a new house, and I've been told that the deer heads are no longer going to be in the house. They got to go to the shop. So that's going to happen. But I tell you what, if that classic trophy is not on the mantle, we're going to have us an issue at Dry Creek. Yeah, I think it will be. I think, and that's the cool thing about the event, the trophy, is she has lived with it like I have. I mean, just the past year or so, she knows what I've went through and I know what she went through. I did a podcast this morning where evidently she was a millimeter from having a nervous breakdown all day long. And I know that. And I think that both of us will be able to sit there and look at that and remember the good old days. Hopefully, maybe there'll be another one at some point.
Well, you're the second angler in the world to be qualified for the 2023 Classic. So you might be a dangerous man. You got a little bit of a hole in the Angler of the Year standings to dig out of from Florida, but Santee Cooper is not too bad, and neither is Chickamauga and all the rest on the schedule. So Jason Christie will be one to watch for sure.
There you go, kicking me again.
Hey, I'm just saying. I want to be completely honest with you. I feel like there are a couple anglers we can be honest with, because we know if we're being honest, that's not the standard you've set. And so I just want to be that. I'll be that coach that says, hey, one more suicide before you go. So maybe you'll have a chip on your shoulder and you'll go back.
I'll be honest with you. It doesn't matter because I'm in the Classic. So, and that's the cool thing about the event. Next week is not the elite Santee Cooper for Jason Christie. It's the Classic on Santee Cooper, because that's how I'm going to fish the event.
That's a dangerous thing, Kyle, I would say. Any last things, Kyle? Otherwise, we'll let Jason Christie go.
I am all good. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm like Ronnie mentioned, you've probably done this 100 times up to this point, but we appreciate you so much for jumping on and talking to us.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day, and
I'm looking forward to your the secret that you said on Wednesday, which is that forward-facing minnow that you guys are going to be coming out with. That looks cool as well as the jig. We love the jig as shallow water anglers, but that forward-facing minnow is pretty cool. So we'll have to get more info from you on that in the next couple of weeks as well.
I'll be happy to share it once we. It's coming. I mean, I'm not going to put a date out there, but it's coming. A lot. I've been on a lot of phone calls this week. We're trying to get everything finalized. We just want everything to be right whenever it does go.
Awesome. That is the standard Jason Christie has set. Thank you, Jason, for joining us on the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, and we'll let the 2022 Bassmaster Classic champion Jason Christie. We'll let him go. Have a safe drive. I know that sounds good. That title does for sure, and the money doesn't matter, Kyle, but the hardware lasts for a good long while, and I know that he's proud of that.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Jason, and have a good afternoon. Yeah, that was some phenomenal insight. I think he's probably so used to talking about these things, but no, he's obviously, you could tell how excited he was, and like we were mentioning, how excited everybody was for him to win. And he mentioned this, a handful of times. I feel like how many people were rooting for him, and I think that stands so true, because so many people have seen his journey, and it's one of those things you can't help but root for him in a situation like that.
Yeah, it's hard to say that he's like an underdog or the story that everybody wants, because he's won so much. People are probably tired of him winning, especially his opponents, but it's one of those things that it was a redemptive classic for sure. Very, very cool to see it transpire the way it did for him. And man, Kyle, I learned a lot from these guys. And so it's very, very humbling and very cool to have Jason Christie or Greg Hatney or any of these names that people look up to get to personally mess with me and mess with you on little inside jokes or poke and prod you and stuff. So it's very, very cool. And I'll never take that for granted. But I know also, I will say, we are unbiased. If Kyle Welcher won, he would be a great classic champion. If Stetson Blaylock won, same thing. If Brian New went wire to wire, would have been awesome as well. Storyline. So we love the stories that play out. And we know each one of these anglers, They have different things that motivate them. It was redemption for Christie. For Welcher, it's his second classic, and he's kind of making a name for himself, especially through YouTube and whatnot. But he is an angler that a lot of people are like, he doesn't get enough credit. I don't know. He's gotten a bunch of credit in a short amount of time because people just gravitate to his fishing style. And so that would have been amazing to see a young angler like him win it, especially with his roots. Stetson Blaylock talking about, his father-in-law passing away, and he's been with Lindsay since they were 12, 13, 14 years old. So that father-in-law is not a father-in-law. That is, a father 2.0. Like that's somebody he knows very, very well. And he was carrying that with him through this week. A lot of different storylines. So we are completely unbiased. We all have the guys who we enjoy seeing win. We enjoy seeing everybody win. But like he said, the cameraman, that's a little cheerleader in the boat, just like your marshal is if you don't have a camera, just like anything. But you were out on the water, and I've been in that position as a photographer as well, you kind of have some rooting, especially for the guy that you're covering, just like a cameraman. It's a little different on Bass Live, but it was very cool. Before we get to you and who you covered on the final day, it was very cool to see Mark Zona with how many years him and Jason Christie have been friends, TV shows they've done together, to see the pure excitement from another professional person in this industry towards an angler for their highest achievement. It was very cool to see Zona like a kid in the candy store on that. But I know you also had high hopes for a guy that you were covering on that final day as well.
Yeah, so I was with Stetson Blaylock right after, he took the lead early in the morning on Bass Track
with that 5-pounder. Yep.
Right. So made the run over to Stetson Blaylock, and it was really interesting. One, it was just a phenomenal afternoon getting to experience that. You mentioned it on the live show, but it's one of those connection things that you'll never be able to break because you were there with them when it was all happening. Like the pure emotion. I told you when it happened, when I shot the photos of him catching his second 5-pounder, I was literally shaking. Like I mean, as if I would have caught it. I mean, I was really close to him. Like when it happened, I was literally shaking. But it was really special too, because I was messaging back and forth with Lindsay during the day, kind of giving some updates. And I mentioned to her, so it's a really unique deal with Stetson because we grew up. I mean, he's a little bit older than me, but we grew up in basically the same area, fished the same lakes. I can remember as like a high school, junior high, middle school kid fishing tournaments, around Lake Hamilton, Lake Washita, where Stetson Blaylock would be fishing. And you didn't even really care about winning the tournament. You just wanted to beat Stetson Blaylock because it was, that's like the most special thing you could imagine. But it was really, really special. And yeah, that last day, like you said, completely unbiased. I was completely fine with anybody winning, of course, as we should be. But no, it was really special. And that final day with Stetson was really cool.
But you do have a job to do. And I remember texting you and I said some words that I probably cannot repeat on the podcast, but I did text you and say, boy, if he wins this, you got you cover shots for years, because some of those photos beside the boat, and I'm going to superimpose the photos over my face right now. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on that, but Stetson scooping that fish on the side of the boat, and then his pure joy of just lifting it above his head and yelling, that kind of momentum, like you said, I've been with anglers that have done so well and lost on the final day. And when that flotilla is leaving and you're the only person left, even though you are paid to be there with them, you are told that that's who you're on. When everyone leaves and you're the only person following an angler, you are invested in that story. And so it was different though, when you pull up on Stetson and more people show up, that energy, man, you're like, it's like as soon as he hooks up, you're like, game time, I've got to do my deal. And you start shooting those photos. And it's very, very cool to be in that moment as if you have any kind of impact on the outcome.
Yeah. And like you said, that was kind of the unique part about it is the longer the day went on, the more everybody thought Stetson had enough, to win, obviously. So his flotilla only grew. I can remember when we pulled up, granted, we weren't, the first people on him because, he'd already been leading on Bass Track for close to an hour, maybe.
And he was sixth to start today. Yeah.
So, we pull up and there might've been 5 or 6 boats, maybe. And then by the end of it, I think the largest count that I ever got up to is like 17 boats, I think, following him. So, while that may not sound like a lot to some people, 17 boats is enough to where you can't see the water behind all the boats when they're all packed in tight like that. So, yeah, it was really cool. And, you know, I'm, you know, super fortunate to have been there and just see the progression of the day. It was really cool.
Yeah, and people would be like, why do you follow an angler on the water when you could watch Bassmaster Live and see everything as well? But I grew up in the generation, you know, I sound like an old man now. I'm 28 years old, but I grew up pre Bassmaster Live as an avid fan. So that was your front seat. I mean, I can go out there and follow whoever I want. There's one game going on, but there's 55 people within that game, and each one of their days is their own separate game. And so the ability to be able to follow and get a front row seat is something that's very cool. I was there when Iaconelli had a shot to win in Beeswax Creek at Lake in 2010. You know, he catches a fish in a whole flotilla. That has the power to scare anglers. An angler could be on the best group of fish in the lake, and you hear a roar from a flotilla. You're on the 15th hole, and you hear a roar on the 17th from someone hitting a birdie. How are you going to putt? That next cast is a backlash. That next shot is going to go left or right. And so there's a huge impact of it. Positively, there are some negative impacts for anglers as well. But were you with him for that final catch? Because Stetson, I got it wrong. I mean, Robbie Floyd got it wrong. Like, so many people got it wrong because of the Bass Track leaderboard. Everybody was within 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds, but it wasn't within 11 ounces, and the leaderboard was a little flip-flopped, but Stetson's was the most accurate, and he had close to 20 pounds on Bass Track. He ended up with 20.5, and that final fish catch of Bassmaster Live, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I thought it was the game. I thought it was game over. I mean, he had enough to land that fish, make a call, Robbie Floyd jump in, and he drives to the ramp to put it on the boat, to put it on the trailer, and he still didn't think he had it won.
Yeah, no, I didn't get to see it on the water. I had left, I would say maybe 20, 30 minutes before fishing, you know, the fishing day was over, to head back to Greenville because I was going to shoot some more of the top lures at the arena. But I was watching on Bass Live, and it was so funny. And if you were watching Bass Live, you'll know exactly what I mean. It was like, you guys were getting ready to shut off, call it good, call it quits. And like, hold up, there's more. Like, wait, there's more. And Stetson catches that last one, and that's when it started getting real for me. I was like, I don't know. I was like, I think this is becoming even more of a possibility. Like, not just a possibility, but like at that point, I thought that would have been enough. But it's hard to say how fast that happened, how critical of a call it was going to be. You know, you can't even hardly tell. So it was like you said, nobody truly knew what was going to happen there at the final weigh-in, which made the whole weigh-in so special.
Yeah, and so I wanted to, this is perfect timing, segue in the conversation. We get to talk to the man, Stetson Blaylock. Stetson obviously, fell short of that goal and finished third place. But yeah, that final 15 minutes of live, like every catch that's made on Bassmaster Live in the last 15 minutes is like, is that the one that won the Classic? And so Robbie Floyd, myself, I mean, I feel bad. How are you, Stetson? I feel bad that I sent a cameraman who was like, I need to ride with one guy back to Greenville from the lake. Who do you think's going to win? And I said, Stetson. And he hops in the truck with you for an hour. And then the first thing I text you and you say, nah, I probably didn't win. And I'm like, I totally thought you won.
Yeah, so I was on, but I didn't hear the first part of that conversation. But so, yeah, so, to answer what I think you said is, to me, there's times I've had that feeling, and there's times I've had that feeling that, man, it's just probably not enough. And I know I said it on live a lot. I need one more big one. I need one more big one. And the reason why is because I really felt that those other guys were going to catch what they've been catching all week, which was 16, 17, 18 pounds. So I knew I needed that 21 to 22 pound mark, and it's almost unheard of there. Not all the way, but it's hard to do that. And being able to catch 20 and some change, and I knew it would be close, but in the back of my mind, I really, really thought that I needed one more fish, and turns out I was 100% right on that.
Well, that last fish that you caught, I don't necessarily know the weight of it. It might have been a 3 1/4, maybe even a 3.5 pound spotted bass, but I didn't get to see the coal because that was the last 3 minutes of live. That was the last 3 minutes of the tournament. And then you literally make that call Robbie Floyd hops in the boat and you run in and you said that I think I need 22. I don't think I got it done. And man, to catch the biggest bag of the tournament, but to still know that you didn't seal it because you don't know what the other guys had. That's got to be such a weird feeling. When you got in the truck, how long did it take you to check Bass Track, or did you check it before you got in the truck?
So, for me, it was one of those things where I felt confident that I had done my best, and I felt like I knew I had the biggest bag of the event just from what my scale said. And I really thought when I checked in that, hey, there's always a chance. There's always that chance that just maybe those guys stumbled a little bit. And the way they were talking, us.
You scared them.
Yeah, I knew they knew that I was close, and I knew that they were a little nervous about it. But in my heart of hearts, I kind of knew that it was going to be really close, but I needed that one more fish. And, I had 50 text messages when I got in the truck. First time I pulled my phone, it was loaded. And, a lot of them were, I think you got it. I hope you got it. No matter what happens, we're proud of you. There was so many emotions going through my mind at that moment that I knew that there was still a chance, but I didn't want to get my hopes up. And, for me to go on that 40-minute drive back to the arena, then we had to wait in the boat yard and all that. It was a lot, and not necessarily draining. It was just, I left it all on the water, and I knew that it was going to be what it was going to be. I hate to use that term because you hear it all the time, but once you're finished, you just have to relax and enjoy the rest of the ride. And it was a fun finish to the week. Going in 3.5 pounds behind, or 3 pounds, 11 ounces, whatever it ended up being, I knew I had a lot to make up. And, had 2 of those fish that you really don't hardly see there very often on that lake. And I couldn't ask for anything more, to be honest.
So Stetson, obviously I got to cover you on the last day there on the water. And one of the most impressive things that I got to see that I don't know that people on live were able to really kind of recognize is obviously you would go from fishing the docks, fishing shallow, and then it was the wind would pick up and you would run to a point and you'd catch a big one like instantly. It seemed like every decision you made would in turn to something good. Just talk about your decision making that last day, kind of how you were making those decisions. And, I guess, like you said, it all worked out as well as it, could have.
Yeah. So I really feel like Hartwell, more than any other lake in the country that I've ever been to, it's a pattern lake. And every time I've been there, you think you've got the best pattern, and then lo and behold, somebody does, wins it doing something totally different. And this guy finishes second and you finish third. There's just always so many things working on that lake that it's easy to get confidence in those decisions when you know that you're going to get a few bites. And so for me, that day it was about, hey, I've got 2 big ones early. I know what I have to do to put myself in contention. And I knew I had to go catch 3 more over 3 pounds. I mean, that was the goal, is to get 3 more over 3 pounds and let it be what it is. And that's exactly what happened. I did bounce in and out a lot. And the only reason I bounced in was that second big one came off the boat dock. Had I not caught that fish, I probably would not have fished many boat docks the rest of that day. Probably would have had 17, 18 pounds, finished where it was. And that would have been the day. But catching that second big one really kind of, in a sense, kind of messed me up on what I wanted to do for the day. But there's not a whole lot you can say that I did wrong there. And I said this idling in. That tournament and that day is one of those weeks that I will not look back on ever in my lifetime and go, I coulda, shoulda, woulda. I won't do it, because I fished really good that week. My smallest bag was 15.5 pounds. I mean, on a lake where that's usually really solid, yes, the lake's getting better. Yes, the fish are getting bigger there. But that's usually a really solid bag. And to be able that to be my smallest bag and then catch the biggest bag the very next day, I'm not mad about it, not the least bit. And I made them guys, I mean, Christie and Welcher, I made those guys have to work to win that tournament. And, you know, if there was one thing I would change, it would be day two, knowing I have a chance to win, just my mind. On day two, it was a lot tougher for me. Mentally, just the fish weren't biting as good. If I could change one thing, I feel like I should have just stayed in it a little bit harder. You know, I caught a good bag, but I felt like I could have gave it just a little bit more intent on day two to try to catch a 4 or 5 pounder. And I mean, I may not have, but I know I did what I could, and making those changes, making those moves, and pulling up and catching those fish. It's always one of those things where when you pull up and you make 2 casts and catch one, you know you're doing the right thing. And I had a lot of confidence that week for sure.
Kyle, I don't want to tell on Stetson, but I'm going to. Word from the fishing industry is that you texted Lisa Talmadge and Eric Lopez and said, hey, if you guys don't put 6 Lake Hartwell events on the schedule, I'm done with Bass, because you've gotten a second in the elite event there. You've gotten third there. We're just waiting for that win at Lake Hartwell. But you mentioned it, and I talked to you about it backstage, that Lake Hartwell has, you know, attributes that are like Lake Hamilton in Hot Springs, and that are also like Lake Ouachita in Hot Springs, 2 lakes that you've fished your entire life. What is very similar and what's different about it to make you just fish so well, especially this time of the year where it changes daily?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. There's Hartwell, more than any other lake in the country, there's multiple things working. And I noticed growing up here in Arkansas that Ouachita and Hamilton fish similar to that. There's multiple things working. And just when you think you've got it figured out, a guy comes in and beats you, and he's doing whatever it may be. And you're like, man, I didn't even know that was even a thing. And so growing up doing that, and then you know, Ouachita's got the red clay and rock mixture, and then deep clear water, and then Hamilton's got the boat docks. So it just, in seawalls, boat ramps, things like that, it just sets up as a perfect mixture of those 2 lakes. But the number one key to Hartwell for me, I believe, is that there's fish in all areas of the water column. I mean, you saw guys catching them in 50 feet of water. You saw Christie catching them on those boat docks in 6 inches of water, and everywhere in between. And I think it's easy for me to not get caught up in that, am I doing the wrong thing? I just figure out what works and run with it. And at the end of the tournament, if you can keep it all together and land your bites, you're going to be right there at the end of the deal.
So Stetson, one thing that, once again, I got to see in person that they might not have showed on live as much, as how much your flotilla grew throughout the day. You know, obviously I feel like every kid dreams of that as a kid, getting to experience that, have all the boats follow you, have everything happen. It never seemed like one bit that, like, you know, spun you out. Never. It seemed like you were so calm the entire day. How are you able to keep your nerves so, I guess, level?
Well, I'm pretty sure that it's 14 years of doing this. And people, when I say that, they're like, what? You've been doing it 14 years? But I have. And, you know, being my 3rd classic, I knew when those boats started showing up a little more and a little more that it was good. And you can read the writing on the wall. And then as the interviews started coming later in the day and things like that, in my mind, I'm thinking, man, I'm right there. And that goes back to what we was talking about earlier, is I knew I was right there. But at the end of the day, on a lake like that, the weights aren't going to jump a lot. They're not going to vary much. And when you catch 20 pounds, you have to know that if they do their job, you're still going to be just a little bit short. And, you know, the being able to stay calm, again, goes back to knowing that even if I go in or bounce back out, I'm still going to be fishing around fish. And that helps also keep you calm, knowing that you may not catch 20 more, but you're going to get 2 or 3 more opportunities at solid fish. And that's exactly what happened. And you got to witness it firsthand. You know, I'd go a little bit without a bite, and then all of a sudden I'd catch one and it'd be a good fish. You know, a cool thing, and I may be getting ahead here, but that last spot where I caught that last coal fish in the last 5 minutes of the day, there was no question in my mind the fish to win the Classic on that point had he bit my bait. I'm 95% sure if I had 15 more minutes, I could have won the tournament right there. And you say, well, how do you know that? Well, I pulled up there, couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to do. And I'm like, I've got like 3 casts. So I spin my live scope up there, and I can see it's either a shallow stump or a shallow brush pile. And there was 4 or 5 big fish in it. And I did not see the fish that I caught. So to me, there was multiple good fish right there, and I just didn't have time. I mean, I feel like it could have been 1 more cast. It could have been 10 more minutes. Could have been a different bait. You just never know. And that's one of those reasons why when I idled in, I said, I'm never going to look back and say, what if I would have made this decision instead of that decision. And that's the way tournament fishing is. But that place on that weekend was just about as good as it could get for me.
Stetson, tell me about that red crankbait, because you and Mark Frazier were basically the only people in the world doing that. I know you and the Fraziers room together and talk together, and you know, if there's any kind of help being given, that's your core system. But we had Braden Cobb as a guest in the expo, probably the last guest we'd expect to have Championship Sunday at the Classic on his home body of water. But he joined the set and was watching, and we asked him about, we were watching you catch him, and we said, what do you think about Stetson Blaylock catching him on a red crankbait today? And he's like, well, when I saw the water tips day 1 of practice last Friday, I cut all my crankbaits off. And so for you, you said, I mean, you've said this already twice in the interview about there's so many different patterns you can do at Hartwell. That is a winter to pre-spawn type of deal, just like we saw at Lanier a couple years ago, you know, the first elite of the season, cold water. That water had gotten up there quickly, but it probably messed up a lot of anglers because not all the fish went up there to spawn like we thought. We saw warming water temps and we were like, let's go. It's going to be a shallow tournament, but it still takes a few days, maybe a week for fish to do that. And there was still plenty out for you to catch.
And you're 100% right on there. I think there's so many fish in that lake those fish were no question pre-spawn. And a lot of them were hanging together. A lot of times I would reel the bait out and there would be a couple fish following the bait in. And then you'd see me pick up the dinger and flip it out there and try to get those fish to react. And not very often could I catch one that actually, you know, trailed the crankbait in, but I got to where I was reeling that thing faster and faster just to try to get them to react to it instead of follow it. And it really didn't matter. I still had fish follow it. You know, they'd be, you know, on the screen, it looked like their nose was touching it and they'd follow it all the way to the trolling motor. So, but for me, I've learned in 14 years that it does not matter what you think. I'll never forget the tournament at Grand Lake that Kevin Van Dam won. I was catching them on beds on a wacky worm and sight fishing, and he goes and wins the tournament on a crawdad colored square bill. And to me, it's things like that you don't forget as an angler, that you put in the back of your mind. And when you get yourself put yourself in that position again, you don't mess up. And Brandon Cobb is one of the best fishermen that we have by far. A friend of mine, love him to death. But I've made those same mistakes on my home lake where you go into it with this thing in your mind where if the water temp gets here, if the wind's doing this, if we have sun for 3 days, I'm going to win doing this. And I think that's what helps me on the trail a lot more times than not. If you look back at the first 2 tournaments of the season before the Classic, a lot of guys are going, what the heck's he doing and why is he doing it there? but it really doesn't matter because those fish do not follow a script. They do what they want. And I've learned the hard way to fish the way you like to fish. And if you get bites, at the end of the day, nobody cares what you're throwing. It's just what you're confident in and the bites that you get. If you're catching the right quality to keep you there at the end, that's all you can ask for and need.
Kyle, you got anything else for Stetson before we ask maybe one more question and we'll let him go?
You stole my Hamilton and Washita question, because being a Central Arkansas Hot Springs guy myself, I was curious to know about that. So I'm all out of questions, Ronnie.
Well, he mentioned Grand Lake, so that's weird. We just got off the call with Jason Christie, and it's weird to see guys who have done well in the Classic that they've done their best finishes are on Hartwell and Grand Lake, and I'm like, they're totally different, but they're very similar. What's the deal? And so it's so funny that you mentioned that Grand Lake elite event kind of keying you mentally for that. But last thing I'll ask you, Stetson, before we let you go, I know you're going to say this, you're a blessed man. If you can fish for a living and take care of your family, then you're all good. You don't need any trophies or any other things to make your career. You know where you're at in this industry, but you've won an FLW Tour event a long time ago. You won an Elite Series event in 2019 after getting second place at Hartwell. The next week you go and get a W. You've been second in Angler of the Year on the Elite Series. You've been second and third, I think, in FLW Angler of the Year. And there's so many. You're fourth in Angler of the Year this year. Classics, you've been in the top 5 multiple times, two of your 3 classics. I could go on and on with your stats, but do you feel like Stetson Blaylock is about to explode? That there is some big, you're going to go on a run. You maybe win Angler of the Year this year. You win a classic that's got upcoming. Is there something that an angler feels like this is not a fluke? I'm stacking some stuff together, but man, I'm making good decisions, and I feel like this could be my time.
Well, I think you have to take that and split it in half, because I've had really good runs in the past on Bass, on FLW years ago, where I thought that, like, okay, this is the year. I've made every top 10 we've had so far. Things look good, but fishing is such a weird sport to where you can be at your best and some little thing change, some little storm comes through and messes up your bite or muddies your creek up, and you make the one wrong decision and it ruins the whole week. So I will say this, I feel different. I feel like the decisions that I'm making on the water don't wrap right back around and go, why are you doing this? I feel like those decisions are, I'm going with it and I'm getting a bite. I'm getting that bite that I need to keep me in. And I'm telling you right now, you hear this every time, all the time. I don't catch them in practice. I don't have good practices. There's something about me sitting there the night before going, okay, I had one bite on this, but what could I change to make it good for the tournament? And there's lots of anglers on the Elite Series that when the tournament's over, they're like, yeah, you wasn't catching nothing, huh? And I mean, it's honest to goodness. I make little changes, whether it's a new bait that I have not thrown the entire week or whatever the case may be, to put together a good tournament. And I feel like if I can ever put 2 and 2 together, meaning have a good practice where I can kind of have a flow of what's going on and things stay the same. And that's what happened at Winyah Bay. I went in there in practice to that area, got bit, said, that's all I've got, knew what I was going to do, and used it to the best of my ability for 4 days and won that tournament. Other things always have to happen, but I feel like this year, the way it started, I feel like I can make a little bit of something out of nothing. And if I can keep doing that on these tougher practices and tougher, starts, eventually it's going to happen to where day one, I'm going to be sitting right there within a pound or 2 of the lead and make the right decisions throughout the rest of those 3 days. If you look back on these few tournaments, I've had one day, whether it be day 1 or day 2 or day 3, where I didn't get the bites I needed. And if I can ever put those together, it's going to be good. And yes, I feel like that, I feel like I'm fishing as good as I ever have, and just got to keep making right decisions, and we'll be standing there when it's all said and done with a smile on our face.
Well, I will say I was bragging to everyone in Greenville, South Carolina, that I wasn't going to ever have to pay for a local lime meal again if Stetson Blaylock wins, because they were going to be treating every time we went in Little Rock. But I will say one cool story that you might not even know about. I have to wrangle the wives, the winning and losing wife, and take them to the stage. And so I shared this with Christie, with his fiance, Shanna. But I remember talking to Lindsay, briefing her that, hey, like, I'm going to grab the ladies, but it's going to be at this point in the weigh-in. So she wasn't just freaking out waiting. I go and slide over to a different section, plenty of distance between all the triangulation of wives. And I get a text that says, what do you think he has? Do you think he actually has a good shot to win? And I remember picking up my phone and looking at it and putting it back down. And Lindsay said, text came back in again and said, don't ignore me. I know you can see this text. And so she was just as much freaking out, hoping that you would win. So very cool story. Stetson, congrats on the third place finish. Congrats on a great start to AOI. I know you're going to be heading out within the hours to head to Santee Cooper Lakes to take care of that for the third stop of the Elite Series. But I know Kyle is a Hot Springs guy, myself as a Little Rock guy. It would have been very cool to see an Arkansan come back on the final day like that, because it was a flair for the dramatic for sure, running in with Robbie Floyd in the boat.
Well, I'll get you guys a trophy. It's coming. It's just a matter of time. And I appreciate all the support and all the support that I've had throughout this season, and especially this week. It's been pretty overwhelming. I didn't realize that many people were pulling for me, so it's been good. And I'm happy with the finish. I think there's a lot more disappointed people that I didn't win than I am. So, I take it as a grain of salt, move to the next one, and we'll get those W's when we can.
Yes, and when we hang up from here, Kyle will have to send you some high resolutions, if he hasn't already, of some epic photos from that final day, because they were definitely magazine cover worthy. So congrats, Stetson. Kyle, what a great interview with Stetson, him keeping it real with us.
Yeah, absolutely. That was fantastic. Obviously, getting to, like I said, see that on the water. And then, I didn't really get the chance to talk to him a whole lot after weigh-in. Obviously didn't want to do that at all. Frankly, I didn't want to have to chat it up with him, because I know he probably didn't want to talk to anybody. But yeah, that was really cool to finally hear some of his thoughts from that final day.
Yeah, Stetson, we appreciate you coming on to the show, and we'll let you go and you get packed up for Santee Cooper, because it's going to be a beat down for the third stop.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
See you, man.
Thanks,
Kyle, we've talked to the champion, we've talked to third place, and it's weird to think that the only person in the event that might have thought they won was Kyle Welcher. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody thought that there's no shot that I was going to actually win this event.
Yeah, no, it is a wild last day. If you didn't get to watch it, it's hard to explain to somebody how wild the emotions were when Stetson took the hot seat. And once we got to Kyle Welcher, I literally looked at Pete Robbins was sitting next to me, and I said, my heart is beating out of my chest right now, because I know, like, the moment is happening right now. Like, whether it's good for Stetson, bad for Stetson, good for Kyle, bad for Kyle, it was like those last two anglers weighing in. I mean, my heart was beating out of my chest. I almost couldn't control it, as if the Razorbacks were playing the Final Four or something. But yeah, it was a wild weigh-in, and just a wild tournament, and it turned out as good as we could have possibly hoped for in pretty much every aspect.
Yeah, and I'm just pleased with the Classic, and this has obviously been a longer episode than most people probably thought they were signing up for, but we do have one more guest that should pop in as well to get a different take, probably a shorter interview, but just someone experiencing the Classic for the first time, because there are some anglers who have never been to a Classic in general until they compete in one. We've had the privilege of attending Classics, not working with Bassmaster, and then getting to experience it with Bassmaster. Some of these guys, the stress of the world's on their shoulders, and nothing's worse than that hour drive back from the ramp, or that 45-minute drive from the ramp, not knowing if you won or not. I say it's the worst, but it's also the best feeling, because the journey, some will argue, the journey isn't after you have the trophy and you have the check and you're in the truck on the way home, the journey is every moment leading up to when the scales read that. And so being in the moment, like we talk about fishing in the moment, but being mentally in the moment and soaking up those things, there is something about every single classic I've ever been to and watched in person I will never forget. You know what I'm saying? This year it was like the wives stories, like 3 women, all of them were very cordial. All of them wanted to cut each other's throats with the win, you know, all that. But different aspects of it. Every classic is special. And I know that you've got some classic memories from this one that you'll hold dearly. But when it comes to Lake Hartwell, what a dynamic place. 54 pounds even was what it took. And I'll go ahead and segue to fantasy. Just a little bit recap on it. My Rapala, 5-man lineup wasn't as great. I think I had, I think I had 3 guys miss the cut barely. And then I had 2 guys make the cut. I think so. And I had Strassner, Heron, and Lester all missed the cut, but all finished in the 30s. And then I had Joey Nania, which was a great wild card for me. I'm super glad that I saved some spots for Drain the Lake and I put Joey Nania in there. But him finishing in the top 13, and then had Jason, or I had somebody else in the top 10. Who did I have in the top 10? I think I did have Christie. I had Christie, yeah, for both teams. So Rapala was an okay team, but for my Drain the Lake, I got triple points, man. That is huge. Triple. I missed out on him last year. I picked Jason Christie this year, and I got triple points. Major boost in the standings if you get those.
Yeah, no, me and you had almost exactly opposite tournaments. So my Rapala fantasy fishing was pretty strong. Had 3 of my 5 make it to the final day, 2 of which in the top 10. And then my Drain the Lake was pitiful, for a lack of better explanation. You and I have talked about it on the phone, but I went from somewhere in the mid 90s to the mid 80s percent wise in Drain the Lake. And like you said, having the winner in really any tournament makes a massive difference, but especially the classic with triple points, that is a make or break type event. You're never going to beat somebody in Drain the Lake in the classic if you didn't have the winner. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I'll say my Drain the Lake team, I split it kind of 4x4. I had 4 guys that I thought finesse-wise, Clearwater may do work. And it was Jeff Gustafson, Brandon Polinick, Taku Ito, and Joey Nania. 2 of those guys made the top 13, Taku and Joey. Brandon Polinick, I don't know. He just does not vibe with Hartwell, it seems, because he finished, near the bottom in 2015, the Cold Classic. All right, and then I think he finished maybe he made the cut, but he was somewhere in the 20s for the 18 Classic. And then this year he was in the 40s. So I was not sure what was the deal with guys like Polinick, Felix, and Gustafson, guys that you'd expect to catch them everywhere in the world, but especially here. And then I had 4 guys at the top that were just kind of guys, either Carolinians or guys I expect to close a classic. And I had Christie, triple points there. That was huge. I had Cherry, made the final day, finished top 20 there. Cobb missed the cut. A little shocked by that, but he did have a big bag on day 2 and the big bass of the tournament as well. And then I had Matt Airy. He made the cut, finished in the 20s, but towards the bottom there of that. So a pretty solid Drain the Lake. And like you, except opposite, I went from 84 or 85% to 93%. So King of Fantasy's back. We're back in the game, baby.
That's disappointing. I was enjoying being ahead of you there for a good while, but
yes,
it's a
honestly.
it's a long season. We've got plenty more to determine, and something you and I have talked about is saving guys in fantasy or in Drain the Lake is huge. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job of not I guess wasting guys super early on. So I'm pretty confident in my second half of the year comeback. It's gonna happen.
I was definitely a little too conservative in the first one. Now we've jumped up and we've had 2 good ones in a row for Drain the Lake. Everybody making the cut for me at the Harris chain, 4 of them making the final day. That was huge. Obviously getting the winner, double points for Elite Series events, triple for Classic. So we knocked out the triple. I'll take that. The problem is with Such and Tommy in our 3-man battle in the studio, they picked Jason Christie too. So we're all still neck and neck there. And I gave them a lot of slack at the beginning of the season with the week 1. But Kyle, we were supposed to have a 3rd guest. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it. Oh, never mind. Never mind. Right when I'm about to say no, he says yes. Let's bring him in. Last guest of the show. But our last guest of the show is going to be a good guest, and you can already tell who it is based on his name right there. We got a classic rookie. There he is.
A classic rookie and an iPhone rookie, apparently.
Yeah, it looks like it. But Wes Logan, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hey, you're about keyed up to get on Kyle, so get on him, please.
Well, I mean, all I got told yesterday was at 1 o'clock we're gonna be a go. So I've been sitting on the side of the freaking highway in Mississippi for 30 minutes waiting on somebody. And I'm like, well, they ain't gonna do nothing, so I'm gonna drive some more. Well, now I had to find somewhere else I could stop and not get run over by somebody. So here we are.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to just go ahead and say that that's Kyle's fault. That's not my fault. You know, I knew that we'd have 2 interviews and we would probably talk a little bit, but you are our 3rd interview of the podcast. We've only had 1 guest ever, but this is the classic episode. And we had Jason Christie, the champion. We had Stetson Blaylock, 3rd place. He had an awesome, moment there where he, a lot of people dubbed him as the champion. So we had to talk to him on what it was like there. And then I wanted to talk to you because you were a classic rookie. You were the first time classic qualifier. There were 16 of y'all out of the 55-person field, but only 5 made the final day cut. And a couple of those guys were nation guys and a couple were elite guys and 1 opens angler. So 2 elite guys, 1 opens guys and 2 nation guys made the final day cut. What was that like, Wes Logan, fishing your first Bassmaster Classic? I mean, you want to make the final day, but man, you were kind of in limbo. You caught them, but not good enough to maybe have a shot to win on the final day.
Yeah, I mean, and just to have caught what I caught to make it to the final day was a blessing in itself, considering the practice I had. I mean, it was really bad. Like I didn't think I wasn't going to catch a bass, but like as far as figuring anything out or having a pattern or having a deal going, like I literally just junk fished the whole practice and the whole tournament. I just happened to catch a few good ones, but that was my main deal after practice. I was like, if I'm going to win, like something crazy is going to happen, but just if I could put enough together to make the final day, that's kind of that's going to be a win for me after what's happened. Because I mean, sometimes it just doesn't set up good for you. And I mean, looking back at it, it probably set up better than I thought it did, but not knowing the lake as well as I did, I just kind of went with what I knew and put it together as good as I could.
Well, I'll start off by saying this. I trust Wes with his pre-tournament predictions about as much as he should trust me with his truck keys. To start with, Wes was talking about how he wasn't going to catch anything, wasn't even going to be on the, there on the final day, and then obviously ends up fishing on the final day. Now that we can look back and be honest, did you have places in practice that you had hope in, but you just didn't want to you didn't want to overfish, overpressure, or did you really just feel like you had nothing and you went off of just instinct on the first day of the tournament?
I really didn't have anything. The last day of our unofficial practice, which was Sunday, it was bad stormy. It was cold that morning. And I left the boat ramp at like 6:35, which is the time we could start fishing. And I ran down the lake and I was going to run as many ditches as I could and just see if I could figure out how to catch one. Cause I'd never caught a bass out of a ditch. Like I didn't know what that pertained to. And I had an underspin tied on, a swim bait and all that good stuff. Well, the first ditch I go to, I stop and I'm like working my way into it. And I can see that there's a dock light like up into the ditch a little bit on the left, like a big green light under the water. And like I'm fishing my way to it. And dude, I look by and I swear there's like 40 of them around it, like bass, stripe, white bass. Like I'm like, well, we've got one step that we found the bass. Now we just got to figure out how to catch them. Well, as it got more daylight, like they started leaving the light, and I finally got one bite on an underspin. Like I figured out, like I was trying to get my cadence down, like letting it sink to the bottom or reel it up high. Like I finally caught one, and there was like 5 with it, and it was like a 3-pounder. But I fished around in there, and I fished around, and I fished around. Never could get another bite. I ran to the next ditch, and like my 3rd cast into the ditch, I got a bite, and it was a 3-pounder, and there was a couple with it again, and I couldn't ever get them to bite again. And that's literally like one of the first places where I ended up starting the whole tournament, like every day of the tournament, and weighing like 2 or 3 fish out of it. But like, dude, I literally, after that, I had no idea where I was going to get a bite. I was just going to run around and fish docks and throw a jig and throw a wacky worm and just see what happened. So That's really like, I literally had 2 places I knew bass live, and I know bass live in all those ditches, but from like a quality standpoint, I knew there was some fish there if I could just get them to bite.
Yeah, that was kind of the weird thing this week at Hartwell was the time of year, the water temperature, fish are active, but those suspended ditch fish, whether there's bait present or not, it seemed like whether you were dropping down on fish or maybe just, a 40-foot cast, or if you're just slinging it and you're reeling an underspin, whatever tactic you're using, it seemed like whatever group of fish it was, you could only catch one out of them, and you'd either pull a school to them or they would stay there and they would get spooky. So it's very interesting now that we have forward-facing sonar. You used to have to locate them with 2D and look for the spaghetti lines again, but now with forward-facing, you can see where they go, how they react. So was that a factor for you on did it bother you couldn't keep catching them? Or did you realize after day one, I'm going to catch one and I'm just going to leave and I'll have to come back or reposition or do something different because I'm just going to waste time with a school that's not going to bite?
Yeah, I knew after what I saw that day of practice when I got that bite, because the problem is they would be sitting there, and I know everybody watched on live, everybody was talking about when they were in little clusters and when you can get them to bite. Well, you would see, you couldn't really see them on live, or I couldn't when I would get one to bite on the underspin, but when you would hook one, there would be 4 or 5 with it, running around. Well, there was a reason that they were sitting where they were at when you got the bite. So the problem was for me, when I caught one, it would bring them to me and then they would scatter. Well, I realized that in practice, once I fished around and couldn't get another bite. So when I got the first bite, the first morning of the tournament, I just sat there. I kind of just backed up after I caught one. I let everything calm back down. I even one time after I caught the second one, I turned around and went the other way, just fishing, and worked my way back to it 15 minutes later, ended up catching 2 more on back-to-back casts that first morning. But being able to see them on that Mega Live was once you would catch one, you would just see them start swimming around, and eventually you could ease back up there and they would all be kind of back in the same little place. But I think the reason it was like that, like you were saying, it used to be you would find them on 2D. I think they were a lot easier to catch then. Especially talking to Cobb, me and him are pretty close. He's like, I've never seen these fish be where you catch 1 or 2 and you can't keep catching them. Normally, once you find where they're at in a ditch, whether it be on a rock pile or a little shelf or something, you just sit there and throw and catch all of them until they're gone. And it just, I don't know if it's gotten a lot tougher on the lake because the live is so advanced and people catch them so much, but they were really spooky once they got one of them got fooled or tricked. It got tough for a minute.
So, Wes, I've gotten the chance to know you pretty well and know that you didn't want anybody to win the Bassmaster Classic other than you. But with that being said, it seems like Jason Christie is one of those guys that you look up to a lot. You have a, special relationship with him. Just talk to us about that and kind of, your thoughts about him winning the Classic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really good friends with Jason, and I'm really good friends with Kyle, and I'm really good friends with Stetson. So however it played out was going to be, I was going to be happy for whoever. But I mean, I just feel like Jason has paid his dues. And the only reason I say that is because obviously what all's happened, but I know how good of an angler Kyle is. And I know that he's going to get his, regardless of what happens, and everything happens for a reason. It happens when it's supposed to. But from a relationship standpoint with Jason, I mean, I met Jason personally. Me and Justin stayed with him at Fort last year for our elite tournament. And I mean, kind of from Justin called me, he was like, hey man, you mind if we room with Christie? And I was like Jason Christie?
with an IE, not with a Y, with an IE.
Yeah, I'm you mean the Indian, is he gonna make me sleep outside in the drive? I mean, that'll be fine, but as long as he wants me to stay there. But just from a growing up watching him fish and the way he fishes, I've learned a lot from him. Just the way his mindset is, that's where obviously we all want to be. But from my standpoint, how I like to attack a lake, he does that to, probably the best in the world, obviously the best in the world now after winning. But I mean, the only thing he didn't have as far as the, winning the Classic was winning the Classic. And I mean, he's done that now, but that still doesn't take away from what kind of angler he is, even if he hadn't won. But I don't know. Like you said, I just really look up to him. I really appreciate him even talking to me because he doesn't have to.
Agreed. We agree with that.
Yeah, no doubt. So, I mean, I really appreciate him even acknowledging that I'm in the world. So that's pretty cool.
That is indeed. Wes, tell me about that moment, because I've walked through the curtain and it's loud and the lights are there and I feel cool, but no one's cheering for me. I'm just walking through to get to where I'm going next. You've probably dreamed of that moment, but when you're sitting in that, and I've described it as an echoey, cold, gray tunnel by yourself, and then you start to pull through. And then, well, Don Day, who's next? Well, we got from Springville, Alabama. And the curtain pulls back and your song plays and the lights go and you're waving to your family and friends and fans. That's an unreal moment that you can't duplicate anywhere else in fishing.
No, and it's truly an amazing experience. And I wish anybody that's ever picked up a fishing rod could experience it. I mean, but that's obviously not going to happen. But just for me to be able to do it, growing up, fishing and reading Bassmasters and watching the Classic on TV and stuff like that, like now me being, everybody's watching me, like was just, you still can't put it into words, but I don't know, from like, all I can remember is when that curtain opened, like the lights were so bright, you couldn't really see anything like straight ahead, like of you, like you could look to the side and like see, fans over here. And luckily my parents and family were like to my right, so I could see them. But like once I like went mute, like I couldn't hear anything because all I could think about was when I was going to step off the boat onto the stage is do not fall. Like whatever you do, don't trip, don't stumble, don't drop the bag, don't do something stupid. So that's kind of all I was thinking of. So once I got like on the stage, I was kind of breathing and I was able to like take in all what Dave was saying and what was really going on.
Now, Wes, having experienced that, how has that immediately affected your outlook on fishing the Elite Series and trying to get back to the Classic? Because I know your first year fishing the Elites, you were, super bummed to come so close to qualifying for the Classic. But now having experienced it, you hear about guys all the time talking about how bad it makes you want to get back. Kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I mean, truthfully, that you say that, I was in practice, I was fishing, and every now and then it would creep in my mind. I'm like, okay, I've got to catch them good the rest of the year because I've got to get back here, because the mindset going into the tournament is completely different than an Elite Series tournament. And I really like that because and that's how maybe that's why my practice wasn't so good, just because I was trying to find, the deal to actually win. But just being able to have that mindset going into a tournament, like us as fishermen crave that, like to go to want to win. And you're kind of scared to do that sometimes in an Elite Series tournament because what the ramifications could be, because you could, gamble and finish 95th, and dude, you've got a hole to dig out of like crazy to get back to the Elite. So I mean, yeah, it's gonna I'm not gonna say I'm gonna fish any harder or practice any harder, because I do that anyway. Like I do it as hard as I can regardless of what tournament it is. But it does make it's probably going, if I do happen to not make it back, it's just gonna make it that much worse.
Yeah, because I'll have you in the Academy big chair. I'll have you a guest on Bass Live, and you'll be hating it. You'll love the exposure, but you'll be hating the interviews. Right. Wes, I wanted to ask you this, because you're a bank beater, you're a jig flipper, you're a shallow water guy. Does this make you a little happy to see the way fish react to live and to forward-facing sonar, where you were saying that it's getting to be year 3, year 4 of a lot of people having some of these things, and maybe they're getting a little more skittish? Does that kind of now take the pressure that the bank used to have, the offshore spots, the ditches, those other suspending fish now get that pressure, and now those fish on the bank, it might be a little more opened up for those fish?
Yeah, I don't know that live will ever not be a player in a situation like we had at the Classic, just because, and like Hartwell's is a different example because there's so many bass in it. Like you're never going to catch all those fish out there just roaming in space. Like it's just not going to happen. So live is always going to be a player there. And from a fish standpoint, I think you're still going to have the number of fish on the bank. You're still going to have the number of fish offshore in those ditches. But the difference is going to be the number of anglers beating the bank and the number of anglers out deep. So you might have 3 of the best ditches on the lake that you could easily win out of. But now when you got bank beaters like me with a live that can go out there and see them and mess with them, and you maybe catch 1 or 2 during practice or something, where normally those fish don't even get touched except for the guys that know they're there. Well, that it's going to start getting, I like you said, I think the playing field's going to get a little more even, but hardly ever does a time when the bank can beat the offshore guys when it's really a good offshore deal. Like if it had stayed really cold, there might have been 1 or 2 guys in the top 10 on the bank, but the majority would have been off the bank, been offshore, wherever, however they would play out, ditches, humps, something like that. But, it always has a lot to do with weather and conditions. And you could never, this time of year especially, you never know what we're going to get. I mean, especially looking to, 2 days from now, our first day of practice, it's going to be like 20. So, but I mean, from going back to what you said, I think it's going to help the shallow water guys from a pressure standpoint. But I think the same fish are going to be up and the same fish are going to be out.
They'll just be more apt to bite. Maybe they've never seen a jig before compared to being like afraid of their jig. But
right, that's right.
But Kyle, you've talked to Wes a lot about his career and you guys' free time fishing and whatnot. What have you seen from Wes? I'm gonna put you on the spot before you ask your next question, Wes. What have you seen from Wes over the first couple of years of his career and how he's grown as an angler? Because I reminded him the last time I saw him in a major tournament, he was wearing a white t-shirt and he wasn't all jerseyed up with sponsors. And now it's a different little ball of hate that we're seeing now.
Well, if I could describe it in one word, I'd have to say adaptability. Going from what you just mentioned, I was there on the water on Lake Washita, that tournament, watching him, thinking, and I've told him this to his face, so I don't feel bad for saying this on this podcast, but thinking, who the heck is this guy?
Yeah, exactly.
I
thought you were taller. I thought that guy was taller.
Definitely not. Probably shorter.
To now, seeing how far he's come in such a short amount of time, if I had to put it in my own words, if I were to want a career as a professional bass fisherman at his age, because we're similar age, obviously we're all 3 similar age, I would want it to go about like his has to this point, because you couldn't imagine a better progression than what Wes has seen over the last few years. And, getting to be your buddy obviously is special to see that continue to grow. And yeah, it's really special, but I'd have to say adaptability would be the one thing, because if you don't adapt and you don't adjust in this career field, you get left behind pretty quick. I think that goes without saying. And Wes has been able to adapt and do what he needs to do pretty much every step of the way.
I will say, Wes, tell me about that. And what about the Central Opens in 2019 was different? Because you had yourself, Taku Ito, Caleb Kufal, Bob Downey, and John Cox were the 5 anglers. That was still the year when we had 5 from the 3 divisions, and now we have 3 divisions plus the overall. So now there's less people per division that make it, but you guys had 5. Of those 5, you, Kufal, and Taku have all won Elite Series events. Bob Downey just finished second at the St. John's. John Cox has won plenty of events, just never an elite event. That is a stacked 5 angler qualification just to make it to the elites.
Yeah, I mean, and looking back at that year, like the first tournament was at Toledo and I didn't have the best finish. I mean, I finished like top 30 or something. But dude, after that, I had like a 7th, a 3rd, and a 5th, and I barely won. Like, and normally, like looking back, like it would have been kind of a runaway. And dude, it was like every tournament. My dang boss was calling me. It was like every tournament, dude, Caleb was in the top 10. Taku was in the top 10. Bob Downey won the freaking grand tournament. I'm like,
you're going to have to tell Riley you're on major business. He might have accepted that call right there, Kyle.
Probably did. He probably said the heck. He probably said the heck with us, and he's going to move on.
Honestly. It's all good though. But yeah, that while we wait for him to come back real quick, the dude, that group, I mean, I brought it up on live at St. John's because Cox and Downey both had a shot to win that event. That is an incredible grouping of rookie class. Oh, there he is. There he is. We got you back, Wes.
I think we got to see just a little tidbit of why Dave Mercer calls him the little ball of hate.
Yeah. There. Well, we may have lost him there. He may end up jumping back in, but we were going to wrap it up after that one anyways. But Wes Logan, Stetson Blaylock, Jason Christie for this episode of our classic recap. What a great grouping of anglers and what a great time. Thank you guys to all those guys joining us, but thank you for you tuning in and listening. Kyle, any last words about the classic?
No, like I said, I mean, I think what we have already said, you could say a million times and it would still be true, is the fact that this classic, really did play out exactly how we kind of hoped to as far as the fishing goes. Wes is back with us somehow.
Yeah, I'm gonna let him say one more last thing before he goes for sure.
God bless. I apologize.
All good.
Dude, I could mess up a steel ball with a rubber hammer right now, I swear. But anyways, I apologize.
No, so you were just talking about how good those people were to get to there. And now when you get here, you're still fishing against those guys, but now the rest of the elite field too. That was a great rookie class.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, actually, Welcher made that rookie class also from the other division. So, I mean,
Schmidt and Felix and
it was unbelievable. Like, just that year, not saying that, I mean, it's hard to qualify any of the years, but really looking back on it, like, knowing that I was a part of that, it was pretty special because I don't even put myself in those guys' position. Like, I feel like they're a lot better than I am. I just happen to get lucky every now and then. So to be in the conversation with some of those anglers is, a blessing.
That's why, Kyle, you said this to me off camera, but how annoying Wes is because he's humble and he doesn't think that he's good at fishing. I'm tired. You are in that caliber, Wes. You've proved it. You got to win on your home body of water and you're getting better.
That's when you're supposed to win. That's what I've told everybody. Everybody's like, well, you won in your home lake. I'm like, that's when you're supposed to win. You got to win somewhere else to be considered like halfway worth of crap.
Well, you almost won just down the street from your house at Gunnersville, and some other places have been close. So we'll see. Well, now I'm going to say that now. Fine. Wes Logan is not worth a darn until he wins outside of the state of Alabama. I'm just going to go ahead. You got a couple more shots this year. Maybe Santee coming up.
I hope so, man. I've fished there a couple times this time of year, and it's going to be. I don't care what the weather is. Everybody's like, weather's going to suck. I'm like, dude, they're going to smash them. It could be 10 degrees. It could be 100. Like, they just live there. Like, that's just what somebody's going to catch them. Like, when they live there, that's what they catch. That's pretty much what it is.
Well, last thing, any last words about the Classic for you, Wes, before we wrap it up? Because it is something special to achieve. You'll only fish your first Classic one time, and to knock it out of Lake Hartwell with the crowds that we had, we set the record for the biggest Classic attendance. And I will completely agree with that. The way the takeoffs were every morning, the way the expo was every day. And then that final weigh-in, obviously day 1 and 2, the weigh-in's not full. And people use that as a reason to say there wasn't anybody there. They lied about the numbers. Mm-hmm. Everyone that's not at the weigh-in on day 1 and 2 are in the expo because it opens later on day 1 and 2 than it does on the final day. So it opens earlier on the final day. They close it up so everyone will be at the final weigh-in. But man, coming through the final day of a Classic, whether you're in contention or not, that place was jacked.
It was really crazy. And I mean, I feel like as many people as were in the crowd at the weigh-in on day 3, the blast-offs every day were unbelievable to me. Like, dude, we would go to back down the ramp and there was people everywhere. Like, you couldn't, all you heard was people saying your name. Like, you couldn't focus on anybody. Like, it was really a sight that I will never forget, especially being my first one. And I'm not saying that they're all not going to be like that, but I feel like Hartwell really showed out just from the guys that have fished Classics before and hearing y'all talk. Like, they really showed out, especially for a Friday morning on day 1. Like, dude, there was so many people there. It was really awesome. And I mean, for that to be my first one, it was really cool. And I mean, I think a whole lot of that's got to do with Neil Paul and what he does with, Anderson County and all that. So a big shout out to him. He's one of the really good guys in the industry, and I'm glad he's on our side.
I think right there, Kyle, Wes was trying to Visit Anderson on the side of his truck somehow or something. Maybe a Visit Neely Henry Lake. He'll get that on there.
Fish Neely Henry's got to go. He's moving to Hartwell.
Yeah, Fish Neely Henry's got the spot right now, and I don't know. They're gonna have to do something to that. Like, we'll have to put some more bass in it if we're gonna keep going there.
Wes Logan, first-time Classic qualifier. I had him on this episode, the extended version of a Classic podcast for Inside Bassmaster Podcast. Thank you for joining us, Wes. Appreciate you taking the time on the side of the road in Mississippi. Somehow, I don't know how you went from South Carolina back to Alabama. Now you're on the wrong side of Alabama because you're supposed to be back in South Carolina. So I don't know.
It's a long story. We've got some truck troubles we're dealing with, but we're gonna get it straightened out. I appreciate you guys having me, and it's always a good time with you too.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Wes. Good luck at Santee Cooper Lakes coming up very soon. Kyle, your boy is a good interview. It was a great time to talk to him about the Classic, first-time Classic qualifier, and first-time phone operator as well.
Yeah, he's definitely always good to talk to, whether or not he says he's on them or he's actually on them or somewhere in between. He's always going to give you a straight answer, and I think his answer is always the same, whether he's on camera on a with a spotlight on him or if you're just sitting there chatting with him. So that's one thing that makes Wes really special.
That is indeed. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. Like we mentioned, a huge expanded version. Wanted to get a couple different perspectives from that classic. Over the next couple weeks, we'll talk to some other anglers as well. And be on the lookout early next week, for the Santee Cooper Lakes week, the third stop of the Elite Series. We will have a preview video and podcast about that as well. But I hope you enjoyed the classic. The 52nd edition did not disappoint. The fans, you guys held your own and did not disappoint either. Thank you guys for joining us on this one, Kyle. We will see you in the next one.
Can't wait.